to your directors at your leader level. And then for each one of these designations, because on the next step that I'll discuss, we have a mapping of education, we now could optimize the education by competence to the role itself, to the job role itself, so that not only do we know what kind of skills we need, we also know how to grow the skills that we need for those job descriptions. So just because a specific job description on the PTD framework says that it requires a list of skills, and perhaps that the person you're evaluating doesn't have those skills yet, doesn't mean he can't occupy that role. It just shows a method of upgrading them to come to the standard that has been set in the repository of roles and job descriptions. Next slide, please, Alexis. Then the final document, I suppose, is the mapping of education for health supply chains. And this document stipulates a set of academic and professional education pathways that align with those job roles and job descriptions, as well as the library of competencies. And the way that we did this, to borrow from our keynote speaker from yesterday, was we took the SAQA database, the full SAQA database, that's the South African Qualifications Authority database of skills, and we used effectively machine learning, or AI, like he was talking about yesterday, to create a first pass analysis mapping the course descriptions to the competency framework. And you can appreciate we had about 14,000 courses that we evaluated down to about 300 against 3,500 competencies that are contained within this PTD framework. We then had them independently verified internally and then outside, thanks to the assistance of SAPEX. So we had about 20 plus people evaluate from a public healthcare point of view, evaluate the education as well as the job descriptions. And what this document ultimately holds is the career pathway that could be used by a supply chain professional association. So if you were growing a professional association in a specific country, you could use these types of educational initiatives either to actually put people on those courses, or a direction of how you would grow those types of educational initiatives inside your own organization. And then because of the way that we've done the mapping, we can do it. We can map new courses into the professionalization framework extremely quickly using the same machine learning algorithms that we employed for this use case. And so it effectively gives you a clear education and career pathway for these supply chain management professionals. And again, we then aligned those to the designation levels or maturity levels. And it also moves through from plan all the way through to return, if you know your score nomenclature. And so if we look at the mapping of education for health supply chains, because we use SAQA, I'm going to use the SAQA examples, but an associate would be something like a skills program, a practitioner, a diploma, and a skills program or a learnership. A specialist might have a bachelor's degree, and in fact, we include certifications as well, because you need to acknowledge the fact that people may not have gotten their skills from a specific university degree. It could be a certification or mentorship program as well. And so we include things like your APEX CLTDs up to your APEX CACPs and CPIMs, etc. Next slide, Alexis. Then the final piece of this whole puzzle is that, as Alexis said, you need to know where to start. This is a very big idea, and it is a very big change. And so it can be quite daunting when you look at what needs to be done to generate a professionalization initiative. And so what we've tried to do is try to encapsulate a process that can be adopted as a first pass into the implementation of the professionalization framework. And I'm going to quickly go through some of the process that we go through. So the first step is advocacy. So the first step needs to be, you need to get buy-in from within a country or within an organization. And in order to do that, if you've been in any major implementation projects in an organization or in a country, you know that you need to get top-level buy-in. And this is where the step of advocacy comes in. And it also happens to be one of the best places where PTD can help you start is in the advocacy of the supply chain management framework. For then moving from step 1 into step 2, where we define the scope. So we now already have the top level stakeholders involved from the advocacy step. That's sort of like your executive sponsors, your top level of the project team. And now we need to then move into the definition of scope, because there's no ways that you'll be able to change the entire country's professionalization policies and processes in one fell swoop, which is why you'll see that this is a circular pathway or a racetrack rather than just a one-stop, a once-off movement. Because each time you need to define the scope and sort of eat that elephant a little bit at a time. So step 2 is your definition of scope, where you'll come out with an implementation project charter. And you'll notice that each one of these major steps, you'll see at the end of each one, there's a definite outcome. And that outcome needs to be signed off and accepted before you move on to the next step. Or else you could spend a lot of time and money wheel spinning with no real outputs. Okay, and a note on steps 1 and 2 is that part of the PTD framework, or the supply chain management framework, is we've developed tools to actually help with the advocacy and getting the project off the ground. And those tools include things like pamphlets that you can give to the top level executives, that you can increase awareness within your organization with. It includes even email templates. It includes a project charter template. It includes a base project plan, so that you're not left on your own when it comes to implementing this big idea. And then, of course, the biggest piece of this is that you would have PTD behind you, helping you with your advocacy along the way for steps 1 and 2. Then moving along into step 3, we have the HR for SCM building blocks, where you'll actually start applying these tools in your context. So one of the big pieces is that you need to know what process and activities that you perform, so that you know what types of job descriptions to apply and in what form those job descriptions need to apply. I'm going to continue going through quickly, just describing the last 2 steps, as we look like we're running out of time a bit. So that's step 3, is all about putting the supply chain processes up against the HR requirements, so that you can balance out your supply and demand, basically. Then step 4 is the improve step, where we actually take the requirements that we found from comparing the supply chain management processes to the HR requirements, and we actually start putting plans together to do the improvements themselves. This results in an organizational improvement summary that needs to be signed off before moving into the implement and monitor step. Then the final piece is the implement and monitor step, where we will actually execute the initiatives that have been decided upon in the organizational improvement summary. And then inside of that step is also setting up to go back into S1 so that we can do it all again. And even more importantly is the fact that what we want to do is we want to monitor the progress and the improvements made through the professionalization activities in the steps, so that we can evaluate what worked, what didn't work, and how we're going to improve on the next go round of the process. Next slide, Alexis. And as I said, from steps 1 and 2, if you would like to implement this in a country or an organization, I would encourage you to get hold of people that deliver and allow them to support you in the implementation of this project, of this professionalization program. And you can do that by subscribing to their newsletter at the email provided. You can have a look at them on Twitter at the tag that's been provided there. They're also on LinkedIn. And I would encourage you to connect with them on PTD, on Twitter or LinkedIn. They always have something interesting going on practically every few days. And then also you can contact them directly through the emails that are on the screen, with Dominique and Alexis being included there. Thank you. So if there are any questions, I'll have a look at them on the discussion. I see that Dominique, you've answered most of them. Please put any questions on the discussion.
And Andrew, we have the poll results as well.
Oh, of course. Yes, of course. So the poll results, interestingly enough, the reason for the question of what barriers would you see in the implementing such a professional standard for those working in public healthcare supply chain management. So the highest rated was lack of buy-in from leadership. This is especially interesting from our perspective, as we agreed with that sentiment, which is why we provided steps 1 and 2 in the implementation methodology, because without the buy-in from top management, you may as well not even begin, because it's a big change, and it'll take a lot of effort, and you can't be managing upwards for that. Secondly, and also probably connected to the buy-in from leadership, is HR policy changes would be too difficult to implement. Again, provided you have the right stakeholders in the room at the top level, we're hoping that we'll be able to overcome that issue. Then, what is the biggest challenge in the recruitment of health supply chain professionals? And the top one, interestingly enough, is academic institutions don't provide adequate training in this area. So graduates don't join the labor market lacking the necessary skills. I totally agree with you on that. If you have a chat with with practically any supply chain management professional, you ask them where they came from, they probably didn't study for this. They fell into it. They fell into it by accident half the time. And one of the pieces in step 2 of the implementation framework is a stakeholder engagement, where we have to get academia involved. If you don't get academia involved, you cannot solve the supply equation. So academia and the top levels of government are incredibly important to engage with. The second one being that health supply chain workers are not recognized cadre of the workers, so the roles are often filled by professionals from other cadres. So that's very well linked to the previous section, because most people fall into it. They often think supply chain is just something you can learn on the job, and a lot of, for example, pharmacists do an extremely good job at running their supply chains. But we need to get a reliable flow of healthcare professional or supply chain management professionals in the public healthcare space. That's at least my opinion. Anything to add there, Dominique and Alexis?
Hi, Andrew. No, thank you. This is really good. I just wanted to say, I think we're coming to the end of this. If anybody's interested in learning more about the framework, do get in touch with us via email or through our social media handles, as Andrew mentioned. And we're very much available to speak to you about this implementation approach. We are already working with a number of countries to see if we can get this embedded into national institutions. So very keen on working with other countries.
Thanks, everyone. Just a final reminder of the quiz at 4:45 through Zoom. Thank you. Result.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay, bye.